Good morning,
Good.
everyone. Go ahead.
You do it, Justin.
All right. This is Justin Connor from the Division of Teaching and Learning. With me, I've got Vivian James from the Office of Early Learning. This webinar is for preschool attendance and discipline information. And before we jump in, let's do a quick sound check. If you can hear me in your dashboard, please raise your hand. If you're going to, okay. I'm going to put the hands down, and then if you can see Dr. James' screen, raise your hand again. Okay. All right, Vivian.
Ready to go. Okay, we just wanted to go briefly over our objectives. Last week we talked about the federal mandates that were driving the change in the data management practices for preschool students. Today we're going to focus on two things: tracking attendance and reporting disciplinary actions. So those are our two. And we will have another follow-up webinar after this today that will go into further detail about attendance. Before we start, we want to make a disclaimer and make sure that all understand this, that in the public schools, we have some public school agencies who are what they call the grantee for Head Start. They are reporting directly to the federal government about their Head Start children, and they manage the grant and the funds themselves. We also have situations around the state where the school system is not the grantee, an outside agency is the grantee, but yet the schools have allowed for their facilities to be used by those agencies. We want to make clear that the only children that we are going to be reporting and tracking attendance and disciplinary actions on are those if a public school unit is in fact the Head Start grantee. So we want to make sure that we're aligning that right now. This may change from year to year, but currently we have about 14 school systems that are the grantees. And our data managers may not understand or know the difference. This again is why we need you to work with your preschool coordinators so that they are communicating to you which children are enrolled, because we will say that we've learned this from districts who do house Head Start programs in their elementary schools, but they are not the grantee. They have told us that we do need to enroll those children for safety's sakes, in case any catastrophic thing might happen in a school, so that we have record of who's in the building or who those children are. But in terms of tracking attendance and the disciplinary actions, we're only going to be doing that for Head Start children who are in these 14 school districts here. Okay, but planning at your local level. For example, this year, Rockingham County, for the first year ever, is the new grantee for Head Start. So this is something that your preschool have to communicate to the data managers about if any kind of change like that happens in your LEA. So one of the first things that we have to think about is when you establish a bell schedule for children. Now, we have to just acknowledge that we have public school classrooms who are funded by certain program types that automatically should be coming 5 days a week, 6.5 hours a day. But we do have preschool children who do not attend the classes for 5 days a week, 6.5 hours a day. And the variations, you need to know what those variations are. And it particularly pertains to children with disabilities who have an IEP, because the number of minutes that a child should be attending the program As you put it into PowerSchool, it is pulled into ECATS. And this information is critical that we begin to get this correct into ECATS, because their intent is for this information will be used to help establish what the child's setting is on the IEP. So again, we need to remind you that we don't want to be tracking and counting a child as absent when in fact they're not enrolled in the program on that given day. Sometimes a classroom itself might have children who come 3 days a week and other children that come the other 2 days a week. So that's why the communication and collaboration and establishment of your process between the data managers and the preschool coordinators is so very important. I'm going to turn this one over to Justin now.
Go back one slide if you can.
Sure.
Let me speak to that real quick.
Okay.
All right. So I had a lot of questions come in about how to schedule, even for those attending 5 days a week. We're not really capturing the courses that are taken. So however you assign them, as long as they're in some course that's set for attendance to be taken, you can do that however you want at the local level. If you want to break it down into subject areas, you can, or if you want to use the preschool homeroom, as long as that represents the entire time that the student is there, whichever course or courses you use.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the FTEs, you are only to create a new FTE for the IEP students. So we don't want you going out and creating FTEs for every preschool student, only those with the IEP. Because we do look from time to time to see who's using FTEs that haven't been approved by student accounting. So there's documentation, and I do believe there's a link. Yeah, there's a link at the bottom of this slide that'll take you to a QRD on how to set up the FTE for IEP students. So you want to create an IEP FTE with an attendance conversion setup with a minimal number of minutes that the student must attend to be considered present, and that would be 50% of the day. So, for example, if you have an IEP student who is required to be there 180 minutes, then you would set the 50% threshold at 90. And this document takes you through every step you need to set up the FTE and the attendance conversion.
Okay.
All right.
And am I right in saying that this is the data that's pulled into ECATS then, Justin?
I'm not sure what ECATS is capturing. I don't know if it's the attendance minutes for the courses that are assigned to the student, or if it's just the FTE.
Okay.
But either way, we want them both set up because what we're doing at the state level is going to end up capturing both.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So this is the tricky part, and I don't want to get too in depth on this yet because I had several conversations this morning with multiple coordinators. And we've got districts that set up their calendars in different ways. And so before we set up some firm guidelines, I'd rather have some smaller conversations with coordinators. So this screenshot is showing you how to set up tracks, because for the students who do not come every day, I'm thinking, but don't hold us to this until next week. And I told Vivian, I think I want to have a smaller webinar just for PowerSchool folks next week, because I know right now on the line we've got EC and pre-K coordinators. So next week I do want to have another webinar and talk you through how to do this. But for the students who attend 5 days a week, it's simple. You can include that in your regular bell schedule and calendar, just the way you do every other student. But for those who only attend 2 days or 3 days or however many days a week, less than 5, I'm thinking that we're going to have to set up tracks for those students. But again, that's going to be something, I don't know if we're going to have to create another bell schedule, because a calendar can only look at one bell schedule. So even if you create a second bell schedule, the calendar can only be assigned to one of those. So we've got some different scenarios that we're looking at, but basically what we want everybody to know today is the students have to be accounted for during the days they're there, and we can't be counting them absent on days they're not, or vice versa. So look for, I'm going to try to have a meeting with a few coordinators early next week, and then we'll host another webinar for Power School folks at the end of the week next week. Anything you want to add to that, Vivian?
No, I'd just like to ask if there are, do you want to stop and take some questions now? Because we're going to talk about discipline next.
Okay, has the recording been posted yet? No, we're going to post both of those today. We held off last week because we wanted to go back and get some more information, but we're going to post both of those today, along with the links that have been shared in previous communications. Somebody's asking if they're not in the list of schools you had on a previous slide, do they need to attend? Yes, this is for everybody.
This is for everyone. We're only saying the previous slide, those 14 PSUs are the Head Start grantees. So if you have Head Start children in those buildings, you need to be tracking their attendance and disciplinary actions. But if you have Head Start children that are not part of those 14 LEAs, you would not be tracking attendance or disciplinary actions.
Okay, Beth Broadway says we use preschool homeroom and attendance code of 1W for the days they're not in attendance. Beth, I'll pull you into that conversation we have next week, because I do know, and I was telling Dr. James earlier, there's several ways we can do this. We've just got to know at the end of the day, what are we going to be pulling and where are we pulling it from at the state level? Are we required to set up a bail schedule if we're not a Head Start grantee?
Let me just say that you probably have other children who are funded by other preschool children that are not Head Start. Do you understand? So it's just that you make sure you're working with your coordinators and you know which children you have. You will do the bell schedule issue, as I understood it to be, for all children then. Is that correct? And then for the children who have IEPs that come less than 5 days a week, we're going to get follow-up guidance on that from Justin's team. Correct?
Right. All right, so the easiest thing to do is only count absent if not in attendance on the days they are there. This is going to be complicated because students are on different days, times, etc. Yeah, she's correct. And that's why we're going to go back and look at how we can set this up so that it's easier to capture everything. Will the track be for visiting students that only come 30 minutes a couple of days a week for EC services?
No, those I'm assuming are, now also I want you to talk to your coordinators about this, but I'm assuming what you've described sounds like a service provider location setting for a child with an IEP that comes in for speech therapy session or a small session like that, but is not enrolled in a classroom. That's why you've got to talk to your coordinators to distinguish the difference.
Did we get an answer about attendance and discipline for centers with no school codes? KC's joined us. I don't know if that's one KC wants to speak to or not.
Hey guys, this is KC. So I'm sorry, Justin, the question was, have we figured out a way to handle kids in pre-K centers without codes? Is that the question?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I can't speak at all to bell schedules because I'm a novice on bell schedules. But as far as how to enroll students that are sitting in a building that does not have a school code but has public school employees. So if the teacher for that center is a public school employee, then wherever that teacher is housed, not physically, but in Power School, whatever school that teacher has been assigned to, is where those children need to be enrolled. And then, Justin, you can take it from there. I don't know what happens after that. I just know that the decision was made with Financial Business Services that if we have a building that it has public school teachers in them, but they're assigned to a different school because that school where that teacher's actually teaching isn't an Eddie school, if you will, then wherever that teacher is on paper stationed, that's where those kids need to be enrolled.
Right. And we're going to get guidance out on that because
Yes.
that's going to require some districts to add grade levels to schools in
Yes,
Eddie.
thank you, Justin. Yes, absolutely. I forgot to add that piece. You're absolutely right. Yes.
Correct. For example, if I am a teacher at a preschool center, but on paper, and my payroll is connected to an elementary school around the corner, and I have preschool children. If that elementary school around the corner doesn't have preschool as a grade, we're going to have to add preschool as a grade to that elementary school around the corner, correct?
In Eddie.
In
the Eddie system.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So we need to put this in writing for our folks to make sure that that's clear.
Well, yeah, to Justin's credit, this decision was made yesterday. Yeah, so I think the guidance can go out when maybe the links to this webinar go out.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
This is a good question. When are we asking districts to have this completed by?
I would think that, well, we're going to have to pull data from this year. So what's a reasonable timeline to put forth for folks in doing this? We will have to be pulling some of this data for this year because it's a baseline data collection year on some of the federal reports that we have to do. Attendance, though, is it's the exclusionary, it's the discipline that's got to be pulled, and the enrollment of the total number of children that have to be pulled. Attendance we could push that off a little bit because we don't have to get baseline data this year on attendance. So, Justin, I'm going to leave that decision up to you folks.
So you're saying discipline should be entered now?
Yes.
Start immediately.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Enrollment needs to be consistently put in place, and discipline needs to be collected because we have to collect baseline on both of those things this year. But if we can work out the attendance issue and the processes, perhaps we can announce a timeline next week when you do the follow-up webinar, and we can put it in the written guidance too.
Somebody's asking, what if the staff is contracted staff?
So this is Casey, and I don't know the answer to that, but we can put that on our list of the iterative nature of what we're doing here. They're contracted and are not public school staff, then I don't know the answer. We only addressed in that meeting yesterday how we were going to handle it when the staff was public school. We did not address it if they were not. So my guess is if they're contracted by the district, the question we will need to ask those above us is, does that make them a public school employee? And I don't know the answer to that. If it does, then they would be treated, the students would be treated exactly the same way that other public school teacher students are treated or accounted for. But if they're not, then I don't know the answer. So Justin, make sure we capture that so we can ask that.
I do know that there's a process because of what I've learned from ECATS, that there's a process where you can get a contracted staff member into the rapid identity system and get a UID for them, but that's as far as my knowledge goes. Where they're attached to it at a elementary school with an EDI number, I'm not sure how that works. Okay, so the question there is, what if the staff member is contracted? Any other questions that you see here?
Yeah, I'm going through a lot of them are duplicates. Does this mean that every different IEP required schedule of days will need to be, will need to be a different track? What if we need more than 6 tracks? Yeah. That one we're going to come back to next week. Somebody's asking that you go back and post or display the page that had all the schools listed.
Oh, sure, I can go back. There you go.
Okay. Should absences be counted as unexcused without a physician's note?
Oh, gosh.
I think you would just treat that how you would
Normally with
your other students.
12, right.
Okay. A lot of questions on the calendaring, so we'll come back to those next week. Okay, I think I can answer the rest of these while you're presenting the next part.
Okay. Because, yeah, because some of the questions I'm seeing, which are good questions, I have no idea how to answer those. Okay. We're going to move into the next piece of what we have to do in terms of counting disciplinary actions. And so I want to, this slide gives you the URL where this guide is located. We've done a lot of work around this guide, developing it and going through a large stakeholder process. In addition, we have done initial training last year. We trained over 300 administrators on the guidance that's in the guide. So I just want to refer you to this resource. And then as a handout today, and I think we had this as a handout last week as well, in the discipline reporting manual, we have developed some scenarios for you on here were certain situations, and then when this happened, we coded the behavior and the incident of what we coded it as, the behavior and the consequence as well. And so if a child is sent home for disciplinary reasons of any sort, it is considered a disciplinary action. So, and that is what has not been happening consistently across the state. It has more so with children who have disabilities. But what we would like to know is if this is sufficient. I think we have 6 different scenarios in here. And and we did not add any new discipline codes. We used existing codes to be able to code them with. So that's the guidance that we can give you at this time. This will be going into the next revision of the discipline manual, but for now, it's a standalone, and the guidance talks to you about how to handle situations around timeout, expulsions, in-school suspensions, and out-of-school suspensions. And it's important to note that the primary purpose of this is to completely stop expulsions. In public school law, expulsions it is a severing of the relationship between the school system and the child. And it's noted in law that that should not be happening under the age of 14. It's just that in preschool, in the guiding practices, we explain that in cases where parents have been told that this is not a good match for us, we think you should just take your child home, that is not an appropriate step, and that would be considered to be an expulsion. So we have to reconsider how the language around how we work with young kids, and that the purpose of our programs are to serve at-risk and disabled preschoolers to get them ready for kindergarten. But if they don't have consistent access to the program that they're in, and the adults that are serving them have not been making adjustments in their instruction or making differentiation in what they're doing and changing anything, then it's not going to help the child be ready for kindergarten. So that's the primary purpose behind all of this. It's simply not to say that Johnny's not a good fit for our preschool classroom here. And it's also extremely important in the guiding practice document, we have done a crosswalk of all of the rules and regulations, including what's in public school law, what's in the child care administrative code, because almost 67 to 70% of our classrooms are licensed by the Division of Child Development, so they have to fall under some of these other regulatory requirements. And then we also have the crosswalk that looks at what are the federal Head Start requirements, because they too have requirements where they prohibit expulsion. And in all three instances, we're trying to make our guidance consistent across all of these different regulatory agencies and requirements that public school preschool programs find themselves in. Now, I'd like to know if you have some questions just about this section alone. I wish I could see the question.
I'm not seeing any on discipline. Hang on, I'm still going through.
And questions, you can still shoot questions our way, especially shoot discipline questions to me. Carla Garrett is another a Title I coordinator out of our office that is available to talk about disciplinary questions, as is Karen McKnight, who is our Head Start State Collaboration Office Director that's in our office. All of us have been working on this stuff collaboratively for the last couple of years. The federal mandate behind tracking disciplinary actions comes from a reauthorization of a section of IDEA on disproportionality. And so that is the why behind that. Okay.
Somebody asked, are we reporting timeout in Power School?
Yes, you are noting if timeout occurs. It has its own code.
Will we be required to monitor attendance for children in daycare centers, walk-ins, etc.?
No, not in private child care centers. These requirements of us are only only pertains to children who are enrolled in public school preschool programs and are attending classes in a brick and mortar school. We do have some walk-ins, and that is on the IEP called a service provider location setting, and we are not tracking their attendance. So again, that's where it's critical that you work with your preschool coordinators at the local level to help make the distinction for the data managers to let them know which ones they will be tracking.
Okay. As a public school unit, we receive referrals for students who have been expelled from their child care center. Are you saying they should not have been expelled?
All right, good question. The monitors in the EC division have helped us work out our own guidance from this. If a child is in a private child care center, public school law is not enforced in that center. Public school law is enforced in our brick and mortar public school programs, or administered by just like a pre-K center, that one of those centers would with a principal would also be enforced. So please understand the difference. Even if a child has an IEP, currently the state is interpreting and counting disciplinary actions for children who are in private child care centers that we're not tracking those until the federal government tells us otherwise. What we are tracking are what are the children who are in our public school preschool classrooms, and we have about 2,100 of those in the state.
Where can we find a clear definition of timeout?
It is in the guiding practice document. And that you have all of your terms of reference are in there, are the definitions.
Okay. So in terms of reporting timeout, this is something that teachers need to do each day? Yeah.
I would, this is part of the communication protocols that you put forth in place between you and your data managers, between the coordinators and their data managers. You might be doing that daily. You might choose to do it weekly. I don't know.
Where's the guiding practice document? That's what you sent me that we're sending out, right?
Yes, it's right here, and it is listed at this URL that we've got on the screen here. And we've also distributed 5,000 of these already, we're doing another print order now for hard copies.
Okay, Wendy, I see your message. You said in the chat that if students attend all day that you do not have to create a bell schedule, but you can't take attendance without a bell schedule. Yeah, what I meant was you don't have to create a new one. If those students are attending every day, you don't have to create a new bell schedule. So sorry about that. Are we required? I think we've already answered this. Are we required to report the discipline of pre-K students that are enrolled in daycare centers?
No, not in child care centers.
Should all children enrolled in public school pre-K programs use the local LEA enrollment forms, request certified birth certificates, health assessments, etc.?
That is a requirement for enrollment into public schools. It is not a requirement for child find and the establishment of eligibility determination, but it is when they enroll in a public school facility. That's part of a requirement for public schools. Unless there's some other alternative reason that it happens at the local level or around individual situations where children are homeless or, they're differing circumstances like that.
Okay. I'm getting a lot of the same questions. Okay, students who come in for speech services only with a SLP, are they registered just like any other child, even though they're not assigned a classroom?
To my knowledge, Justin, I do not believe that they are, but it is feasible that an LEA has put this in place. You would not be tracking their attendance, nor would you be tracking their disciplinary actions if the LEA chose to enroll them. Well, the children are going to be enrolled in Power School anyway because they have an IEP. So they have to be enrolled in Power School in the first place. But we would not be tracking their attendance or their disciplinary actions.
Okay. Should we include their funding source in there?
If you went upon enrollment, now we have the demographics. Upon enrollment into the program, you would say which program they're receiving services from. State Pre-K, Title I, Head Start, Exceptional Children, etc. That's in the drop-down menu now.
If Head Start is in our school building, but we are not the Head Start grantee and the teachers are not employees of the school system, the teachers are employees of Head Start, do we put these students in Power School? And if so, what about the teachers?
It is, what we have learned from other counties, we're not saying that this is a requirement. What we've learned from other counties is that for safety purposes, you would want them in Power School so that they are counted for in case of an emergency. But to my knowledge, that is not a requirement. But many of our districts have chosen to go that route because of safety reasons.
Vivian, this is KC.
Yes, ma'am.
So, and Justin, you can probably answer this for me as well. So if the students aren't public school students and the teachers aren't public school employees, is it feasible that the districts that are including them in Power School are putting them in the below 300 school?
I'm not sure about that, but I do know one county that's doing it, so we can inquire with that one county.
Yeah, I would check with them. My guess is that's the guidance that would come out of the agency, is that they be put in a below 300 school, so they're not included in public school counts.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, can you go back to the screen where the discipline that's required to be reported? Yes.
Yes, hold on. Okay, so we have our guidance is talking about how to record timeout. The guidance is around expulsion is forbidden. In school suspensions, we have given you examples of that, and out of school suspensions, we have given you guidance for that. And part of what we're saying for in school and out of school suspension is that if it's part of a tier 3 intervention plan, that if the determination of a part 3 or a tier 3 intervention plan according to the MTSS process, if they have decided to say reduce a child's day by a certain number of weeks and then build that child's attendance back up over time, that's part of an intervention plan with a clear beginning and a clear end, and that is not considered to be part of a suspension. It's when there is nothing in place and a child is suddenly sent home because of he had he or she had some kind of a behavior issue happen. That is part of it because the adults haven't put any other steps in place to try to prevent that.
By recording the preschool discipline in Power School, will this now be included in the CDRC report?
It has to. That's the civil rights, right? That's the civil rights report. So that is what IDEA disproportionality is requiring now, is that we include the 3 through 5-year-olds but we have to do a risk ratio calculation. And in order to do that, we have to capture discipline for all children in public schools. And then we have to disaggregate it by children with disabilities to see if it's disproportionate. So that's why we're doing this.
All right, the definition of timeout in the guiding practice book says separation in a monitored setting. Does this include within a classroom? As I find that most of my centers do not remove students from the classrooms.
That's true. And the purpose of that language was to bring home the notion that you may, even if you're going to isolate a child in a timeout step within the classroom or outside of the classroom, that child under the age of 5 must always be under visual supervision by an adult. We can never leave them alone, and that's a requirement for little kids like this. I don't know if that answered the question though, but that was the reason for the term in a monitored situation.
Okay. He said no, that didn't answer. Does it have to be entered in Power School?
If the consequence of the behavior was a timeout, then yes, you would put that in Power School.
Okay. Who at the school level would know all of the funding programs for all pre-K kids? If there's a specific person, couldn't we just give that one person permission in Power School to add the special programs? That would be up to each district on whether or not you want to give that person that access.
And when you ask who is the person, that's why you want to assemble a team meeting at the local level with all of your potential preschool coordinators or lead people to be able to have this discussion and identify who's on first base and who's on second base, etc.
If we have students in a building but enrolled at another location, how should they be enrolled?
We have students in a building but enrolled in that's the guidance that we're giving them, right, Casey?
Yeah.
So, and the question is, how should they be enrolled? Isn't that what we're going to talk about next week, Justin?
Yeah, I need more details on this one because I need to know what kind of students they are. If they're regular preschool students or IEP students.
That's what I agree, Justin. We need a little bit more information on the kids before we know.
Okay, so we're going back to the question about timeout. Does timeout inside the classroom need to be documented, or only timeout that results in classroom removal? So if they're putting them in a corner somewhere in timeout, is that still considered timeout and need to be documented in Power?
What I ask them to do is to refer to the guiding practice document that's in there that has the definition of timeout and stick with that, okay?
All right. The scheduling information, we're going to have a meeting with just Power School coordinators next week. I got a question about dual enrollment, but I'm not really sure. It says, will Power School program selection allow for dual enrollment? Students can be. Yeah, give me more details on that, Janice. Speech-only students, we said those do not have to be tracked, right?
No, you might have some children who are enrolled in a preschool classroom that receive only speech therapy. But then we have the unique situation where we have parents driving children into a speech therapist, receiving therapy in the public school facility, but the child is not enrolled in any of the classrooms. There's a distinction there. Those are the children, and when they are being driven in, that's called the service provider location, when they're being driven in for their services for a short period of time. We're not tracking attendance in those situations.
Okay, if a student is Head Start and NC Pre-K, which selection will the Power School data manager select? So
You would
select both, right?
both. They would select both.
Yeah. You can assign multiple special programs. That's all the new questions. Oh, has this information been shared with preschool teachers? The information in regards to the discipline actions that must be entered in Power School, timeout, etc.
We've shared this with administrators, but and our assumption is that they are going to share with the preschool teachers. But that's a very good question, and one for us to seriously think about. What's our next wave of this to try to make sure it gets down to the teacher level? And we are about to start regional preschool coordinators meeting in the 1st of October. So we probably should be taking this out to them as well to ask those questions. How are teachers learning about it? And what should we be helping LEA folks with in order to accomplish that?
There's nothing wrong with printing copies of the guiding principles,
Oh,
right?
no, that's for you. You can do that locally at your level if you wish. You can also, I can also talk to publications, and if they would put it out there so that if you didn't want to print it yourselves, we may be able to publish it out of the department for the general consumption.
What if blended funding is used for Title I, where the preschool receives Title I funding, but it is not used to pay for individual student slots?
I'm going to have to defer this question to our Title I coordinator, and I'm not sure if Carla's on the line today. Could you read it one more time to me, please? Yeah, Carla is on the line. I don't know if she can speak or not. She's got a
I'm gonna unmute her.
Yeah, if you could.
Okay.
Carla, can you hear
I've
us?
unmuted you, Carla.
She said, I'm on the
We
line.
will. We'll get her to answer that question and send it out.
Okay. All right. Yes, I need to write the question down and then have Carla help me to get the answer for that answer.
Oh, wait a minute. I unmuted the wrong Carla. Hold on.
Okay.
There we go. Unmuted her. It looks like.
Hey,
There
it's
we go.
Carla. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so the question is, what if blended funding is used for Title I, where the preschool receives Title I funding, but it's not used to pay for individual student slots? So if you are using Title I funds to support preschool, then you would still count the child as Title I. If it's supporting services for Title I preschool children, then you would still click on Title I. And any other support that's coming from other programs. So again, it could be more than one answer.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Mhm.
Okay. I have a question that Casey might be able to help us with. This is coming from Suzanne Cotterman in Durham. She said, I'm still not clear on the pre-K center fix. Our pre-K center has a number of 289 and our teachers are attached to that number. So what should we do? So that's an under 300 number, which would indicate that it would be private. Is that correct?
That's what I would think. If it's an under 300 number, that means it's not they're not public school staff, so therefore they're not public school students in the real sense of the word. So those children, according to what I'm hearing you say, Vivian, we would not need attendance nor discipline data on.
But I know her situation and I know which center she's talking about. And I'd like to ask Suzanne, are these public school students that you have there?
Yeah, she said yes. They are public school teachers.
Then they should be assigned to the school, however they're being paid. So it's my understanding, and again, this is from Financial Business Services guidance. So if this isn't the case, if they're not being paid by public school funds or they're not assigned to a public school, then that's a different scenario that we'll have to take back to Financial Business Services. But if those teachers are actually assigned to a public school in order to get paid, then those kids should follow the teacher.
Okay, so Suzanne, we're going to have to get back with you on that one. And I know it's a big center. I've been there before. And it's unique. It's housed in a unique kind of facility. And so we had another question from Suzanne Hussey, I see here about, when a child withdraws because the parents decide to withdraw them and keep them at home, it's not technically a dropout or a transfer. They're simply withdrawing from that school. And sometimes, Suzanne, the cases that I've heard of, some people who have withdrawn their children did so because they were encouraged to do so because of the child's behavior. So I just wonder about that. Justin, is there a withdrawal just that parents can withdraw? Is there a code for
that? Yeah, I thought I responded to that.
Okay.
That would be W1.
W1. Okay, thanks. Good.
That would be dropouts.
W1. Okay. Thank you. And you did. I didn't understand what the answer was.
What if NC pre-K funding is substantially supported by local funding? I don't know per child, but I know that NCPK dollars do not even cover teacher salaries, so I'm thinking local funding would apply to all of our students.
I don't know if it's all, but we do have an option there for local government, correct?
Correct.
And so you would identify both NC Pre-K and local government. Are there other questions that you see, Justin?
Hold on. I'm not seeing any new ones that we've not went over already.
Okay. Okay, so towards the end of next week, Justin will be doing a follow-up webinar to talk about different options for tracking establishing the bell schedule and doing attendance. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Can I ask if timeout only applies to preschool students?
Timeout is in general statutes, I believe, for all children. It is not just for preschool students.
Okay.
Okay, you think we have it covered?
Yeah, if I was responding to one. Somebody pointed out that the student accounting manual says that these students are to be coded with a withdrawal code of W-2. Oh, it's on page 54, so let me get with LaShawn and figure out what that W-2 is correct or if it should be W-1.
For withdrawal by parent.
Yeah. Prior to the compulsory attendance age.
Okay. Okay, so we'll follow up on that one.
Did we clarify that we will be adding preschool students attending CTE Childcare programs at the high school?
I don't know.
Question we had last week.
Justin, what is the, I don't think that one was taken to financial business services. Tell me the acronym. What are the kids?
CTE Childcare?
So yes,
CET?
yes, and
right.
Yeah.
Career and technical education.
Yes, and they also are licensed by the Division of Child Development as well. And we've been in contact with the two consultants that are over them, but we have not talked about including them in the attendance piece here yet. So I don't know the answer to that. And here's the other piece is that those classrooms typically are housed within high schools because it's the high school
Right.
students.
So here's the question. I think the question, and again, we should get specific. This is a pretty specific case, and we should get clarification. But if those teachers are public school teachers, then those kids, that grade range needs to be expanded to include pre-K, and the kids need to be enrolled in that school. However, according to the guidance that we've gotten. However, if the teachers are not public school teachers, but rather DCDEE employees, then that's a different story.
They're not DCDEE employees. They're licensed by DCDEE, but the employees are public school employees.
Okay. So let's get 100% confirmation on this, because I know it does seem a bit strange to add a pre-K grade range to a high school. But I also know this is happening. I mean, I know we've got several schools in Durham County, high schools who have pre-K, CTE pre-K classrooms. So let's see if we're right that this follows the new rule of if the teacher's a public school teacher, then the kids should follow the teacher. And we'll get confirmation on that from Financial Business Services.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Do you see anything else, Justin?
Somebody just pointed out that they do have a CTE preschool, and the high school is coded, so they've got pre-K in Eddy along with 9-12.
Excellent. Then that's great. And I mean, my sense is based on our conversation with the Financial Business Services director is that if those teachers are teaching, those kids are public school teachers, and those kids are public school students and should be enrolled in the school where they are. But I just want to confirm, because I know we didn't specifically talk about high schools with child care centers. So I just want to confirm that. But if that's what people are already doing, don't change. Don't change a thing.
Okay, so we'll take these questions that are left and have a meeting early next week and put out some step-by-step guidance later in the week after the webinar.
Okay. Woo, okay then. Thank you all so much for attending. It's been a really wonderful engagement that's been going on around this, and we so thank you for the thought and the work that you're putting into it.
All right, so this webinar was recorded. We'll get it posted either later today or Monday, and I'll share that out with everybody that attended the first webinar last week and this one today.
Okay.
And we'll also put it on the NCSIS site.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys. Bye.
Uh-huh.